edition of the Sunflower Nation's Women in Leadership podcast. I am super excited to have with me Miss, or shall I say, Dr. Lauren Wells. Dr. Wells is a phenomenal woman and has recently written and published a book, which she will definitely share with us. I have read the book and had the privilege of actually writing a review for it. It was amazing, very insightful, great resource for leaders, particularly in education. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lauren Wells.
Thank you, Dr. Banks. It's a pleasure to be
Thank you.
here.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, what you currently do, what keeps you busy these days.
Whoa. So a lot of things keep me busy. I'm a sister, I'm a friend. I am a new godmother to a little boy who will be 3 months in 7 days. Professionally, I'm an assistant professor at Kane, in the Kane University in the Educational Leadership Program. I have a consulting company called Creed Strategies that works with schools, districts, nonprofit organizations, philanthropy, really focusing on issues of racial equity, but also in the context of thinking about what does it mean to work collectively towards shared goals and shared outcomes. So I have a very community-centered, organizational-centered, context-centered approach to working with my clients, if you will. I get in the mess and try to help people think about, understand, and create new ways of being that disrupt the messiness, the toxicity, the dehumanization of racism and racial injustices in the work that we do.
All right. So you are a change agent. I love that. So how do you become this phenomenal woman that you are, right? How do you become an author? How do you become a professor? What was the journey to becoming Dr. Lauren Wells?
Well, it wasn't a straight line, that's for sure. It was when I graduated from high school. I actually wanted to be an anesthesiologist, and I went to school, and my major was biochemistry. And I chose that because I loved chemistry, and I loved science. I also loved English and writing. And I got there, and it just didn't click with me. There were probably a lot of factors involved in that. And so as we were talking, I ended up dropping out of college. I spent 2 years in school, and then I just kind of was like, this is not for me. And I didn't even say for me right now. I was just like, this is just not where I'm supposed to be. And I spent several years waiting tables in jazz clubs in Philadelphia. If you're familiar with Philly, in the early 90s, there was a jazz club called Zanzibar Blue, and I waited tables there. There was another restaurant called Jack's Firehouse, and I waited tables there. And there's another restaurant, I can't remember the name of it. But as I was doing that, it just kind of became clear to me what I did not want to spend the rest of my life doing. My feet hurt a lot. You know, when you are waiting tables and you're on your feet all the time, it's a different kind of like foot pain. And so it propelled me to think about why I had left school, to sort of own my own intellectual capacity in a new kind of way. And I went back to school. I started over as a freshman. I think I was 22. And I was determined the second time around to excel and to exceed, and I did, expectations. And I just decided that I wanted to teach. Initially, I thought I wanted to be an English professor because I love reading and I love writing. Um, my first application did not work out for me. So I ended up again in a space of just kind of a liminal space where it really wasn't clear what was going on or what was doing, and worked all different kinds of random jobs. Um, and then I decided if you want to teach, you don't have to teach at the university. And I started teaching as a high school English teacher on a provisional
So I'm
certificate.
going to pause you right there, right? So that's a lot, so much. And we could talk for an hour just about that 5 minutes that you just shared, right? So, first thing, I love that you share that it wasn't a straight path for you. And a lot of times, I think young women think that, there's this exact science. I need to do this, this, and this. And then if I do those things, then I will achieve this. And uh, as I talk to different women through this platform, I realize very, very, very few of us have, been able to create this timeline for ourselves, stick to it, and end up where we want to be. So it is a journey, and everybody's journey is different. And I think it's so important for us to recognize that and celebrate it, because oftentimes when the plan does not go the way we had hoped for, there's a lot of discouragement there, and feelings of worthlessness or failure. And to me, that's part of the journey. That's part of what develops you and your character. So I love that you said, what, I spent 4 years waiting tables, and what I did learn was I knew what I did not want to do. And I think that's part of the journey too, just identifying, okay, sometimes you don't know what you want to do, but knowing what you don't want to do also is helpful, because that starts to eliminate things and narrow down that process for you. So I appreciate you for sharing that, because a lot of times people come on and it's kind of like, oh, well, I do this and I'm so dignified and I'm perfect. But we all know that's not the truth.
And I will say
So,
that there was, those feelings of failure and unworthiness and disappointment in myself of leaving college were definitely a part of the journey. Um, and um, and I think that what I learned, even from kind of moving through that process, um, was how to sort of sit with those feelings when you have them, right? Because we are disappointed, when things don't go as we want them to, or as we think they should, or as other people or the world around us tell us that they should. It's our interpretation of that that kind of ultimately shapes how you respond to it. And so I've learned throughout the course of my journey, um to and it's been a long journey and a lot of learning, to not make failures or disappointments or things going awry about who I am as a human being and my worth as a human being, and to create different narratives and stories that allow me to change course or change direction or understand what has happened in a different light, so that they become tools for moving forward and not something that keeps me stuck in a place of apathy or disappointment or lack of self-regard.
I
Because
love that you say that.
and that's a really hard place to the pit, it is a hard place to be. And so I've learned to catch it when something happens and my internal self-talk is pulling me in that direction versus, okay, so what is it that I can say to myself about what is happening here that is going to be useful to me, and play the function that I want it to play versus some other purpose that's going to not help me out in a situation or move forward.
So you said two things that really stood out to me. One was that, and I say this all the time when I ask people, what are the most important characteristics of strong leaders? One that I consistently feel is important is the ability to pivot, right? To change course. Things don't go as planned all the time. You have to be able to pivot. But you also made mention of being in that feeling of the pit, right? You're you're in that pit. How do you come out of it? And a lot of what you said, you know, speaks to being able to reflect, um, and then pivot. So how do you know when you're in the pit? And, as you're in the pit, how do you come out of it? What
So,
tools have you used?
um, so I'll say that when I'm in the pit, excuse me, when I'm in the pit, my body is telling me that I'm in a pit. Um, I get heavy and weighted down. Um, I, I mean, I cry in the pit, and not just the the cry that you have because it's the good cry that you need to have, but just real deep, sort of ongoing, just like I can't stop crying, like there's something really coming out of me now. My mind tells me because the B tape that's rolling, that's the tape that is the negative stories about myself, about my capabilities, about my place in the world. It gets going and going and going, right? So I become caught up in a cycle of, well, this isn't going to work, or this is happening, or this is what you should have done, et cetera, et cetera. And I will say, and that through some courses that I'm taking now, I'm taking a course called Compassionate Inquiry with Gabor Mate, and it's a psychotherapeutic course that I thought would just be helpful to me personally, but also give me more insight and tools into my work. I've never been a person who won't allow myself to feel what I'm feeling. And I think that that's a really important part of moving out of it, right? To become aware of what you're feeling, to name what you're feeling. And now I'm learning that part of that naming is to understand the original source of the feeling that you're having and where it comes from in your past, right? In your childhood, in other experiences that may have created trauma in your body, and to process that and then to engage in yourself around a reflective process that really asks you, how does this serve me now, right? How does it serve me, to tell myself a story, and for example, around the book, which was a challenge for me to release, just honestly. How does it serve me to think that I to think that the publication of this book was sort of a fluke, right? And that I'm not as qualified as all of these other people or as impressive as all of these other folks who you see on Instagram and Facebook. And not a huge social media person, but I'm not completely immune to the to the reality of it, or to the consequences of like seeing the worlds that other people create for us to see. Um, and that feeling of inadequacy, right? And so I have.
So when that imposter syndrome that you're describing, when it shows up, what do you do? Tell us.
So for me, the one of the ways that I have, and it's a real in the moment, is that I have come to a place where I say, no one put me here. God put me here. Right? Like
Mm,
this is something that is even greater than my own doing. And that has helped me feel grounded and um, to take ownership in, for example, meetings where I have felt that my um, presence was being questioned or diminished, or where I was being intentionally sort of disregarded or overlooked. Um, or, for example, when in a meeting with a colleague whom I work closely with, um, and was being purposefully ignored and marginalized, in order to move through that, just that like finite amount of time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long it is. In that moment, I just said, you know what, this was, you didn't do this, you didn't put me in this position, you didn't create this opportunity for me, this is from something that is bigger than you and bigger than me. And I believe that in my whole heart, that where we find ourselves, um, we obviously contribute to our path, but that there are much greater forces and powers at play in our lives. And that if we become aware of them and attuned to them, then we're more aligned with a path that is authentic to us and authentic to our purpose. So that's one way that I deal with it. Another way that I deal with it is meditation, and just again like sitting with the feeling, um, sitting with the feeling, sitting in moments when I've had the feeling before, and knowing that the feeling didn't match up to the experience, right? So unraveling the untrue story that I'm telling myself about where I'm supposed to be or why I'm supposed to be there. And imposter syndrome is real in all kinds of ways, and um, a lot of people have imposter syndrome, right? I think most
I
people,
do. Right, right, right.
right, in various different kinds of ways. In the course that I'm taking, there's a woman who's in the course. I'm a Polish woman who lives in London, and we were practicing the method, and she shared that she often felt like um, an imposter because when she moved from Poland to London, she faked knowing more English than she did. And so that contributed to her feeling like she should not have had the job that she had. And my response to that was a person who was doing everything that they needed to do to survive, right? That is a symbol of strength to me, that you were able to do that and to navigate your way into a meaningful to an income for yourself, to sustain yourself in a new country that you were completely unfamiliar with, and with limited language skills. So I also think seeing other people's stories, right, help us um, process the falseness of the story that we're telling ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I certainly have been there. And I think you're absolutely right, that seeing other people struggle with similar things and they appear to have it all together, is helpful. And that's a big reason why we do this podcast, right? Women in leadership. So these women who, appear to be all put together, right? And they're doing great things and they're affecting change and, they're achieving these goals. Uh, but nobody sees, what you went through in order to get to where you are now. And there's a story behind that. And too often, those stories are not heard. All you see is the beautiful finished product, right? The author, the college instructor, right? That is so impressive to have your own consulting business, to be really able to impact change within our communities. But no one would have guessed, that you took a break from school, right? No one would have guessed that. No one would have guessed that you struggled with imposter syndrome or, that feeling of being in the pit. And so it's so important for us to be able to share these stories because there's somebody listening on the other end of this and who's inspired and who's feeling like, okay, I can do this now. Knowing that you went through this, I can now move forward because it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It means that I had a little detour and I can still get to where I want to be. So tell me in regards to your family dynamics, I know your sister. You mentioned from the very beginning you are a sister, and your sister also is an educator. And so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, your family has, um, is rooted in education, right? There's a strong belief in education. So how was that response from your parents when you decided, listen, I'm not going back. I don't know that this is for me.
Um, my mother was so my parents were divorced by the time um this happened, and there was a disconnect with my father. Um, but my mother is a person who has pivoted a lot, um, and reinvented herself a lot. And I'm gonna get emotional, because it's just, like, I think that that's one of the, when I think about my mom and I think about the many lessons that moms teach us, the many lessons that our parents teach us, the good ones and the bad ones, right? Because we get a whole lot of lessons from from family
Hmm.
and parents. Um, the the ability to redefine, um, and um, I don't want to say like reinvent, but to redefine and to, at different points in your life, call on different parts of yourself in order to reroute, redirect, rediscover a path that is going to work for you, um, and to help you be just safe and secure. One, right? Like, to have the things that you need to survive, but also help you become more clear about who you are as a person, and uncovering and discovering new talents, in yourself along the way. So I don't. I mean, I've done a lot of things, as a lot of kids do, that I think along my life that parents are like, "Why are you doing that? Like, is that really what you want to do right now? Did you think about it?" And of course, my mother asked those questions, but she's always been supportive, um, and has always, I think, allowed, um, for the grace that is necessary to know that you're going to come out on the other side as a better version of you. Um, and she's always been there to provide support when it was necessary. So um, yeah, that's how my mother responded to that. I mean, like we could go even a little further back. A few years ago when my sister was moving, um, I walked into the house and there was this transcript sitting on a table. And it was my high school transcript. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, I was like, this is not the story I've been telling myself for the last 40 years of my life. I was like a solid D student my junior and senior years of high school. Things really, like, on that trajectory to college took a turn um, for me. And when I saw that, I didn't even have that memory of, at least academically, how off course I had gotten. I think school became very uninteresting at a certain point, and I became very disconnected from school, not from curiosity and not from reading and not from um, sort of my natural interest in writing and knowing about the world, because I was always a reader, but definitely, uh, schooling became challenging. And even then, I know that I'm sure there were conversations about it with my mother, like, what is going on with you? But I don't remember like a real sense of you're a failure and you're never going to be anything if you don't get yourself together. And again, memory is faulty. So that could just be me also remembering things the way that I want to remember them. But I don't, like, even physically, when I think about it, have physical responses in my body that would suggest that there was any kind of like shame overlaid over those parts of my life by my mother.
That's a key takeaway for me. As a mom with a kid in high school, um, those are really difficult years, right? And a lot of times my son will make a decision that I'm like, what is he doing? Like, what is he thinking? I would never do that. When I was a kid, I was so afraid of being in trouble. I was like straight and narrow. Like, I did not want to disappoint my parents. I did not want to be in trouble with them. And my son is, I would never say he's a bad kid. He certainly isn't. He's one of the kindest people that I know. And but he challenges people. Like, he will challenge you. He questions everything. Very inquisitive, and has no problem telling somebody that he does not agree with them. And so oftentimes I'm like, what is he doing? Like, you know, but it's a good takeaway for parents who might be listening, that, despite the challenges that your child presents, there is a level of support that they always need. And they remember it, years later, they're going to remember the things that you said. So just the power of the words that we use, and what we speak into our children is so important. So that's a major takeaway. You spoke a little bit about trauma, um, and how sometimes when you reflect back now, you um, realize that certain things resonate, certain emotions within you. Is there a traumatic moment that you feel like occurred at some point in your life that that kind of maybe shifted you away from school, or um, really just changed your outlook?
Um, so it's a complex question for me, um, because I have complex trauma. Um, my family dynamics were not desirable, to say the least. There was domestic violence in my house. I was beaten by my father. And so just the whole, right, environment that I was developing in, developing an identity, coming to understand myself, coming to understand my mother and my sister, and relationships between men and women and life. My whole entire childhood is shaped by that reality. So I think it's fair to say, as it relates to education, that maybe I held myself together for as long as I could, right? And then it was just like, I can't even like pretend to be engaged in this educational space, or learning when all of this other stuff is going on. So when I look back, um, at when I look back just at the transition to high school and all of the emotions and experiences that you have in high school, um, I think that that's the way that I would sort of look at, um, what was impacting me and how it was impacting me. Um, and it impacted me in all the ways that, you might expect to be impacted: academically, socially, emotionally, all of them.
So that being said, when you look at your life now, do you clearly, everything that we go through has some effect on us? Has it affected the way you view relationships? Do you feel extra cautious as you enter into relationships in your adult life? What are your views on parenting? And you mentioned that you're a godmom. Congratulations on that. It is a great joy being a godmother. But how has those experiences, those traumas, affected how you approached family dynamics as an adult?
Um, I mean, well, I'm single. I'm not married. I've never been married. And there's no way that I could, honestly or realistically say that that doesn't play a role in, um, how I have shown up in relationships in the past, or how I have, um, experienced other people in relationships. And that is both intimate relationships and friendships, right? Like, it is all encompassing. Um, I I will say that I think that, um, for anyone, for all of us, right, that those things that we experience, as children, particularly from, I mean, from when you're in the womb until, you are, until your prefrontal cortex is developed, are all shaping and impacting how your brain is literally wired to perceive, to take in, to analyze, to respond to information. And so is your nervous system, right? The brain is a part of your nervous system. So for those of us, and I think that there are many more of us, right, who have traumatic experiences in childhood, or experiences that create trauma in us, in our childhood, we embody those experiences until we get to a place where we do the work of processing how that trauma lives in us, in the specific ways that it shows up in us. And so, pre sort of that real intense work, wanting to understand what that looked like for me, I've been a very vigilant. I have a lot of boundaries. Like, there's boundaries like all around me. There are wire fences, there are electric fences, dogs. There might be like an armed militia around me, just protecting me from the emotional experiences of feeling like I don't belong, feeling unworthy, feeling like there's something wrong with me or like I'm damaged. And so that's kind of the way that it has played out for me, is that I protect myself and have protected myself from any any possibly imaginable threat, right? Because that's what our brain does. Is it is out there searching the environment around us constantly for threat. And threat could be anything. It could be the way somebody looks at you. It could be someone
Absolutely.
saying something.
Absolutely.
It could be, you know, not getting the grade on the paper that you thought you should get. And so I've had to do a lot of work, and I'm still doing work that has much more to do with what is the safety that I create for myself, in myself, um, so that I don't have as many boundaries around me and can allow people in and experiences in, and know that when there is something that is triggering to me, that it is the child in me, right? It's little Lauren who is having that memory experience that still lives in my body, so that adult Lauren can engage in the world in a way that is more healthy and more functional for me. And it looks different, you know, for everybody. I'm fortunate to have some friends who are also very committed to their own sort of personal work, as it relates to releasing all kinds of traumatic experiences from their lives and from their bodies, so that they can be present in the world in a way that is really authentic, and allows them and us and me to enjoy, you know, what it means to be alive. But you got to scrape away. You really have to do the work of like peeling away all of those layers of like hurt and, memory and emotion that are those that history, and not the present, right? Because our responses that we have in the present are not about what's happening in the present. They're about a memory of something that happened in the past that
Right.
your body is alerting you to. And so you're responding to something now that isn't even happening. And so meditation, at least for me, has helped me to become really aware in the moment of when I'm responding to something. Like I know what's going on in my brain so well. And I can literally, whether I'm facilitating a PD or speaking in front of an audience, when a thought creeps up, I'm like, that's not the thought that's going to serve you right now. Or when there's a feeling in my body, oh, I'm being judged, that I can catch them pretty quickly in order to stay present in what it is that I have to do in order to do the best that I can do in the present moment. But that took a lot of work. It did not, you know, it didn't happen overnight. And being able to, you know, if somebody says something, um, un, unhelpful or toxic when you're leading a professional development, that could derail the rest of your session.
Absolutely. I've been there. What inspired you to write the book? Tell us a little bit about the book, and where can people find it?
So the title of my book is There Are No Deficits Here, Disrupting Anti-Blackness in Education, and I am wearing the t-shirt. You can buy it on Amazon. What inspired me to write this book was a lot of work that I had done with schools and school districts around school reform that really stayed focused on technical change, right? Policies, programs, et cetera, et cetera. And implementing those things, having some impact, but then becoming really aware that underneath all of everything, even if we pick the even if we pick a strategy that is a great strategy that all the research has shown does X, Y, and Z, if our beliefs about the students and the communities that we are working with are anti-Black and deficit based, how that strategy is going to be implemented is not going to be done in ways that are healthful or that tap into the genius that our kids have, because we fundamentally don't believe that it's there. And I felt it was really, really important to bring that message to the surface, because there's a lot of knowledge that a lot of people have about how to design schools, how to teach great classes, how to be transformative principles, all of those sorts of things. But if we don't come back to us and what we believe, then all of those tools won't go anywhere. And then
The
fundamentally,
foundation.
yeah, and then fundamentally, I think that Black children deserve to be in places where people love them and see all that they are. And that if you are in front of Black children, even if it's one, that you have a responsibility to assess what is going on inside of your mind about Black people so that you can do the job that that one Black child needs you to do for as long as they're in front of you. So that's what inspired me to write the book.
And I can't say it enough. The book is phenomenal. It is a great tool for leaders, specifically educational leaders. I made the recommendation for a course that I'm teaching to add it to our course readings. It really is a great tool with solid research. It's not opinion, driven. It's a solid book. It's a solid book. So congratulations on that. It's a great body of work to add to support our kids. So my last question, because we are already out of time at this point, but I cannot leave without getting this question in. What advice would you give to a young woman who is coming up and trying to figure out where she belongs in this world?
Know thyself. It is worth it. Spend some time really getting to understand your heart and your spirit and your soul, so that you can be authentic and that you can make decisions that feed who you are and not projections of what we are supposed to be.
Amazing. I love that. Know thyself. Dr. Lauren Wells, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks for those hard questions that I haven't talked about anywhere before. So,
well, thank you for your transparency. I appreciate that.
And thank you for taking the time to read the book when it was still a draft and to put your name on the inside of it. I'm really appreciative of that. It means a lot.
Proud to be able to do that. Like I said, solid body of work. So to my listeners, I want to thank you for being with us today. I know you definitely got something out of this one because it was absolutely amazing. May your hearts be filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days. Wishing you love and positive vibes. Until next time, take care.